You are what you eat, or viewed from a different lens, you are what you consume. If everything you engage with online tends to be more negative or cynical, then the chances are you're probably going to reflect those same qualities in either your own life or your thinking. And that's not to say that there isn't any merit in these things and that bad things aren't happening or that things in the world aren't the best. But the reality is that these social media companies and algorithms don't care about you personally. They function and operate based on engagement. They ask themselves, how can we keep our users coming back day after day and increase our revenue and shareholder value? Gathering more data on you by the videos you engage with, or setting up limitations and restrictions on videos you can watch without creating an account to incentivize you to make one so that they can begin their detailed profile build on you. They'll then use this profile to curate a feed which they think, or the algorithm I should say more specifically, that will recommend content it thinks that will keep you engaged and keep you on their platform to further build out their profile on you behind the scenes. And one study I'd like to reference is one from the National Academy of Sciences, and I'll link it in the description. And as a side note, I'd like to reference official studies and documentations for certain things going forward to try and give some balanced views and documented studies and opinions where I can and rely less on personal anecdotes, but just as a sidebar. But back to the point, one study shows that we might initially shape our own feeds with preferences and interests we choose, but over time and with different platforms, these preferences can become the jump point to rabbit hole recommendations or used to tailor engagement-based algorithms that can amplify emotional or divisive content. And trying to remain as balanced as I can from this one study, there's more out there that go into the same topic, but just using this one as a reference. They do say that through their study, there isn't conclusive or definitive evidence that they can say 100% that these platforms run solely on these engagement-based algorithms, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't the case either. It's just that they couldn't conclusively prove it. And I don't know if you guys watched it. This kind of get into some conspiracy type stuff, but if you guys watched the Boondocks, there was something, I think the character was like Ed Wensler Jr. or something. He said the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. So just because there isn't evidence to show that this is the case, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not either. And you can poke holes in that thought process all you want, but just without getting too deep into that, I'd recommend you read it or read other similar studies. And at the end of the day, even if these curated feeds were tailored to an engagement-based setup, these companies still don't care about the content itself that's recommended to you. All they care about is what they can do with the information based on the profile that is built on you from this content. They can, will, and in most cases, do sell your information created by this profile to data brokers or advertising companies for the potential of a sales conversion. And in the event of not even the platform directly, but one of these third-party entities that they sell your data to experiencing a data breach or something, then it's just, oh, well, your information and profile is just out there for everyone, I guess. But, that's another topic for a different time. And, this might sound kind of schizo, but in reality, this is how it works. And this is how these companies make their money. And they can offer you a quote-unquote free service of their platform by profiting off of you directly as the product by selling this out. And if you want to try and get around it and you don't like the ads, there's a premium buyout option in most cases that can cover the difference of what they would make by showing you the ads directly, but that doesn't mean they still can't sell this profile on the back end to these data brokers and advertising companies to double dip, so to speak. So at the end of the day, you're really just a dollar sign and a line item on a spreadsheet to these companies. They don't really care what you watch or engage with so long as you engage with their platform. It just so happens that we're more likely to engage with something that might make us angry or is divisive in nature instead of something positive. And I'm not saying we can't or shouldn't engage with positive things, or that, again, bad things aren't really happening and to bury our heads in the sand, but to maybe take a step back and try and be more mindful of the content that we do engage with, because to be quite honest, in this day and age, it's quite hard not to be engaged with these platforms or social media or technology as a whole. It's definitely possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but as a society, we're very much so dependent to some extent on technology and have adopted it as a standard. So instead of just trying to virtue signal and saying that, you shouldn't engage at all with these things, that just wouldn't be realistic because, like with many things, I'm saying this to and for myself as much as I am to anyone else who might be watching. So I don't think it's realistic to just say to not engage entirely with these things because at some point you most likely will. And it is like a drug in a sense. So almost like a drug, instead of just trying to teach plain abstinence and avoidance, which could be the best case scenario, but maybe not so realistic, I think more good can be done in trying to give out advice on harm reduction or safer methods, like just being more mindful of the content we consume and engage with, and trying to override the automatic tendency to click on or engage with clickbaity titles or posts or replies that can just be straight up bots in some cases, to just try and catch ourselves before we do. And when we do, tying back to the start of this, to just think about the fact that we are what we eat. If we continually and consistently feed ourselves a diet of nothing but negative, divisive, or slightly biased content, at some point, these biases may lean us further and further into one direction or towards one side of a certain issue to where we fall down these rabbit holes that exist that, again, the shareholders could not care less about because they've already made their money. So if this is the standard or an accepted norm of our time, then maybe it's a futile attempt to try and push a more positive and mindful narrative against a sea of content that might be curated and designed to pull you in emotionally for the negative. But just because something may be futile or may fail, that isn't a good enough reason for you or I to not try and do it anyways, because you might also succeed. Even if it might seem like a long shot, and maybe that's some negative bias bleeding in, thinking that this type of content wouldn't be super successful or make any impact. Regardless of that fact, I'd rather be an agent of some positive or neutral at worst than to try and be like everything else and just push negativity to farm engagement and profit and not care about how what I say or put out might affect someone listening. But if my content isn't successful because of that, then so be it. And I'm not saying that I won't ever discuss or talk about topics that may be negative or have negative aspects like in my last video, but overall I'd like to be a force of at least some positive if I can be, and have that be my form of rebellion against what seems like an accepted standard of just constant negativity and constant engagement bait type of content. But anyways, like always, thanks for watching. I'll reference that study in the description, but if you like this, if you have any comments or thoughts, let me know. Thanks.